So how'd it go? Were you able to lay out the columns using floats? Now I'm going to show you the methods I used. First, in order to float the columns next to each other, I need to give each column a width. I'll show you what happens if you don't set a width. Back in my style sheet, inside the media query, I'll scroll down to the columns section here, and I'll target the class call, and I'll float them left by typing float left. Back in the preview, when I refresh the page, nothing happens. The columns are technically floated, but their content takes up the full width of their container. So there's no available space on either side of the columns to accommodate them horizontally on the same line. Back inside the media query, I'll give each column a fluid width value. First, I'll target the primary column with the class primary, and I'll set its width to 60%. Right below, I'll target the secondary column with the class secondary, and I'll set the width to 40%. I'll save my style sheet and refresh the page, and now my columns are floated on the same line. So my layout looks pretty good. Now I want to create more separation between the columns to make the content a little easier to read. As you learned in an earlier challenge, the spaces between columns are called gutters. So to create small gutters between each column in my layout, I'll once again use left and right padding values. So in the call rule, I'll add a padding left property and set the value to 1em. Then I'll add a padding right property and set the value to 1em as well. All right, so everything in my layout seems fine. But if I go back to my style sheet and apply a red border around my container, we can see how the container's div's height has collapsed. Its height doesn't expand to surround the floated elements. And since there's nothing to clear the floats, the natural behavior of floats causes the content in the footer to wrap around the right column here. Also, when you shorten the viewport height, the text in the columns overflows into the footer, and the footer appears underneath the columns. This is why you need to clear floats in a container. Fortunately, you already know the fix for this. I can simply give the parent container the class clearFix. And my layout is now perfect. What's useful about floats is that you're able to change the order of the columns without having to change anything in the HTML. For instance, if I want to reverse the order of the two columns, I can change the column's float value from left to right. And now the column order is reversed. And that's all there is to it. Great job. Now that you know the differences between floats and the inline or inline block display methods, when should you use inline block over floats, and vice versa? Well, it depends on your layout and what you're trying to accomplish. You can use the inline block method to lay out navigation items side by side or create a simple two-column layout. Or use inline block when you need more control over the center and vertical alignment of your elements. As you learned in the previous section of this course, aligning an inline block element, like a column, to the top, middle, or bottom of a container is simple with the vertical align property. And centering a horizontal navbar in a header is also easy with the text align property. Use floats when you need content to flow along the left or right side of an element. For example, flowing text around an image, or pushing one column to the left edge of its container and the next column to the right edge so they appear on the same line. One advantage to using floats over inline or inline block layout is that you don't have to deal with the default horizontal whitespace created by the browser, but you do need to be aware of collapsing containers. So that'll do it for CSS floats. Keep up the great work, and I'll see you in the next section.